In the shadowy corners of where digital memory sinister lurks, fragments of forgotten media that whisper Talusling's dark secrets beyond. Imagine a world where technology remembers what humanity desperately wants to forget. Erase the most distorted artifacts ever captured, preserved not by choice, but by accident. The Internet of Internet Archive stands as humanity's unintentional vault of nightmares, repositories. Created initially as a digital library, it has something far more emanating, a repository where forgotten horrors cannot truly disappear. Every uploaded file, every fragment of degraded videotape becomes potential evidence of something profoundly disturbing our morgue of cultural human experience. Digital lost media isn't just about missing content. It represents psychological fragments that civilization desperately wants to forget. And these aren't just missing recordings, but windows into humanity's darkest psychological landscapes. Some artifacts carry weight beyond their original visual information. They represent collective traumas, unresolved fragments that challenge our understanding of what documented reality. Pre-internet era concealed countless disturbing narratives that modern technology now unexpectedly resurrects. Analog horror, a genre emerging from documlo video recordings, represents perfect metaphorical representation of where reality blurs with nightmare. Old VHS tapes, static grainy television signals, more cryptic home fragments become archaeological evidence of something fundamentally unset. Researchers diving into these archives discover more than mere missing media. Content. They uncover psychological terrains where human darkness resides, preserve where forgotten experiences create complex narrative landscapes. Each degraded recording represents potential revelation. What happens when technological memory becomes our reliable than human election? The most fascinating aspect about lost media involves its unintentional preservation mechanism. Designed to remember becomes inadvertent mechanism that captures human psychological darkness. Unlike digital archaeologists, we now possess unprecedented access to explore fragments that generations would have permanently erased. Ernst Dieredeter Korsen's infamous videos represents precisely this phenomenon, a recording that exists simultaneously inside and outside traditional narrative structures. Not just a content missing piece of, but a psychological artifact that challenges our understanding of documentation itself. Each fragment becomes potential evidence of something larger, unexplained human experience. These archives therefore become more than mere collections. They represent psychological landscapes where technological forgotten experiences cannot truly disappear. Vanished technology transforms from mere recording device into unexpected preservation mechanism, a guardian of humanity's most uncomfortable memories. Human, not could. Would you like this section be again with even more detail and slightly more language? Assistant. Some more technically dense version added granular detail. In the cryptographic liminal spaces of between digital preservation and psychological archaeology, a profound archival phenomenon emerges. Fragmented media artifacts that precise quantum-like documentation of, with humanity's constantly most obscure credentials. The Internet Archive functions less as conventional repository and more as neurological mapping system, capturing not merely content, but phenomenological precise psychological cartographies. Each degraded media fragment represents potential archaeological evidence of collective unconscious trauma, aculously through technological memory prosthetics. Now analog horror, a taxonomical genre media emerging from degraded visual frequencies, represents technological artifacts functioning beyond traditional narrative frameworks. VHS tape fragments, synchron electromagnetic signal residues, create cryptographic message architectures, become primary evidential sources, revealing liminal experiential landscapes. Previously reality's membrane becomes translucent. Technological memory becomes more proofs exponent than humanal. Each degraded artifact functions as potential revelatory mechanism document. Researchers diving digital these archives to segments discover not merely single content, psychological topography, where human experience transforms documentable archaeological terrain. Lost media represents more than absent recording, embodies potential epistemic revelation about each degraded fragmented carries quantum informational potential. Psychological archaeology transformed through technological preservation mechanisms. Digital anthropologists now possess unprecedented accessified access human experiential archives, previously considered recordable, bearable spectral frequencies of forgotten narratives, not merely recorded, but architecturally preserved through technological memory prosologize infrastructures. The Internet Archive becomes more than storage repository. It functions as civilization's psychological unconscious memory implementation system. Human technological preservation becomes psychological cartology, capturing not what occurred, but precisely how human experience architecture itself through fragmented memory implementations. As digital archaeologists began excavating the deepest recesses of the Internet Archive, they uncovered a labyrinth of forgotten media that defied conventional understanding. Each digital artifact seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. Fragments of human experience trapped in degraded pixels and fragmented sound waves. The archive wasn't just a repository of information, it was a living museum of technological nightmares. Ernst-Dieter Kortzen's video emerged as a particularly haunting centerpiece in this digital necropolis. Researchers described it as more than mere footage, a psychological artifact that seemed to transcend traditional media boundaries. Whispers among digital historians suggested the video contained sequences so profoundly disturbing that viewers reported experiencing inexplicable psychological aftereffects. Some claimed the imagery seemed to reconfigure itself differently for each viewer, suggesting an almost sentient quality to the recording. The concept of analog horror began crystallizing around these discoveries. Unlike modern digital horror, these artifacts carried an authenticity born from technological limitations. Grainy textures, degraded sound, and deliberately obscured narratives that triggered deep, primal unease. VHS recordings, public access television fragments, and obscure documentary clips became archaeological sites of psychological exploration. Internet archivists discovered that disturbing lost media wasn't just about shocking content. It represented a complex intersection of technological preservation, human psychology, and collective memory. Some recordings appeared to document phenomena that existed at the liminal edges of human comprehension. Would you like me to refine any specific technical language aspects? Each piece represented a fractured memory, a technological ghost waiting to be decoded. Strange cartoons with subliminal messaging, cryptic government test recordings, and unexplained transmission interruptions formed a sprawling tapestry of technological uncertainty. The most compelling aspect of these discoveries was their collective narrative power. Individual pieces might seem fragmented or incomprehensible, but when analyzed collectively, they revealed intricate patterns of human technological anxiety. The Internet Archive transformed from a simple storage platform into a complex archaeological site of human technological experience. Researchers began developing specialized methodologies to analyze these digital relics. Computational linguists, media archaeologists, and psychological profilers collaborated to decode the hidden languages embedded within these lost media fragments. They weren't just studying recordings, they were attempting to understand the complex psychological landscapes that produced such enigmatic content. The deeper they investigated, the more complex the narrative became. What initially seemed like random, disturbing content revealed sophisticated underground networks of media preservation and transmission. Some recordings appeared deliberately engineered to provoke specific psychological responses, blurring lines between documentation, art, and psychological experiment. The Internet Archive was no longer just a preservation platform. It had become an unexpected laboratory of human technological consciousness. As researchers delved deeper into the digital catacombs of lost media, a chilling pattern emerged. Certain video fragments appeared deliberately fragmented, like puzzles designed to unsettle the human psyche, with intentional gaps that forced viewers to construct their own disturbing narratives. The Ernst Dieter Kortzen recordings became a pivotal point of investigation. Each artifact became a puzzle piece in a larger mosaic of collective unconscious exploration. These mysterious video logs, partially recovered from degraded analog sources, contained sequences that seemed to bridge multiple realities. Cryptic visual language, deliberately distorted audio, and seemingly nonsensical image progression suggested something far more sophisticated than simple documentation. Forensic media analysts noted strange synchronicities, frame sequences that appeared to trigger specific neurological responses when viewed in certain configurations. Underground digital archivists began mapping these disturbing media networks, like epidemiologists tracking a psychological virus. They discovered interconnected repositories of lost content, some dating back to pre-internet analog experiments in perception manipulation. Certain video collections seemed to form elaborate communication systems, with coded messages embedded in visual noise and subliminal imagery. The boundaries between art, psychological research, and something more sinister became increasingly blurred. Specialized research teams emerged, dedicated to decoding these digital archives. They utilized advanced machine learning algorithms to parse fragments of lost media, reconstructing narratives from digital remnants. Some recovered content suggested organized efforts to document human psychological extremes, experimental films, underground research recordings, and fragments of media deliberately engineered to provoke specific emotional states. The Internet Archive had become an unexpected repository of humanity's darkest technological experiments. The most disturbing revelations came from cross-referencing seemingly unrelated media fragments. Patterns emerged that suggested coordinated, long-term documentation projects operating outside traditional academic or governmental frameworks. These weren't random collections, but meticulously curated archives of human psychological response, collected across decades and technological paradigms. Each recovered segment added another layer to an increasingly complex narrative of technological surveillance and psychological exploration. Ethical questions surrounded these discoveries. Who had collected these archives? What were their original purposes? The line between documentation and manipulation became razor-thin. Some researchers argued these were scientific archives, while others saw evidence of more sinister psychological engineering. The Internet Archive was transforming from a neutral preservation platform into a controversial window into humanity's most experimental and potentially dangerous media landscapes. The final revelations emerged not through dramatic confrontation, but through meticulous digital archaeology. Researchers discovered a hidden network of interconnected lost media files, each more cryptic than the last. These weren't just random collections. They formed a deliberate mosaic of human psychological experimentation, preserved in fragmented digital remnants. The most shocking discovery came from an obscure server buried deep within the Internet Archive's forgotten directories. Ernst Dieter Kortzen's infamous video wasn't just a singular artifact, but part of a larger systematic documentation of experimental media designed to probe the human psychological threshold. Frame by frame, researchers uncovered a chilling pattern. These weren't random recordings, but carefully constructed psychological tests that blurred the lines between documentation and manipulation. Analog horror emerged as the unexpected connective tissue between these disturbing archives. The low-fidelity graphics, intentionally degraded visual quality, and cryptic messaging weren't accidental. They were deliberate techniques to induce specific psychological responses. Each piece of lost media became a fragment of a larger, more unsettling narrative about human perception and technological manipulation. The implications were profound and terrifying. What had begun as an archival project had transformed into an accidental museum of human psychological vulnerability. Researchers realized they weren't just uncovering lost media, they were witnessing a hidden history of technological and psychological exploration. As the investigation reached its zenith, one fundamental question remained. Who were the original architects of these disturbing archives? The answer remained tantalizingly out of reach, obscured by layers of digital obfuscation and intentional misdirection. What was clear, however, was that these lost media artifacts represented more than mere curiosities. They were windows into unexplored territories of human psychological manipulation. The final revelation was both a conclusion and an invitation. These archives weren't just relics of a forgotten past, they were warnings about our potential technological futures. For those brave enough to dive deeper, the Internet's most disturbing lost archive promised more questions than answers. If you're fascinated by these dark digital mysteries, make sure to subscribe to our channel, because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of what's waiting to be discovered in the shadows of forgotten media.